Okay, so today we're going to start a new Mishnah, so it's a good opportunity to refresh ourselves from the Gemaras that we've been learning, which is mostly individual, coupled with a couple of connected inyonim, all having to do with rivers, but all of the different approaches. Now, this Mishnah, very interesting, is going to give us yet another slant. If you think we've learned it all on rivers, we haven't. And we're going to learn something this morning, which is a little bit complicated. So we have to really keep a cheshbon here, because the Mishnah gives us a couple of little interesting twists. So let's start with the Mishnah on Ayin Daled Omid Beis, about 2/3 down. Mishnah says as follows. Interesting scenario. Malve Odom, again, in an agrarian society, a lot of different things were done, which, again, I mean, it's not that they're so unique, we can't do them today, but for the most part, in a smaller society like in Eretz Yisrael or in Bavel, the approaches were, very, very unique, very interesting. Malve Odom as Ari Sov Chitin. Okay, so we talked about that a person would hire a sharecropper to work his field. They would make an arrangement whereby, of course, the sharecropper didn't own the land, but he farmed the land, and he would make his part, and also he would get his wage based on the produce. So let's say they split it 50-50, whatever it was. He did all the work. The earth yielded, 100, let's say, saw there were 100 bushels, they would split it. That typically was the way things were done. Now, here's what happened. If the sharecropper came in and said, I'm willing to do the work. I have no money. I have nothing. So the owner says, you know what? I'm going to front you the seed. Let's say you're gonna plant wheat. I'm going to front the seed. You're going to plant it, you're going to work it, and we'll split it 50-50. So to the sharecropper, it's kol harevach, because he has nothing. So that was a very interesting arrangement. So in this case, the malveh lent him the seed and the seed, I guess, was wheat or wheat seed, however it was done. And he would go ahead and farm. And what was the deal? The deal was bechitten. So after he harvested the wheat, then he would give him the amount of wheat that they agreed upon. So the chayra, starting out, we learned quite a while ago, we learned it again, you cannot lend saw the saw. What does that mean? I'm going to lend you a saw of, let's say, wheat, and you're going to repay me a saw of wheat. Why was that not acceptable? Because that would entail returning wheat at a later time, and it could very well be for a different price. Let's say a greater price, because things went up, and that would be ribis. Avak ribis would be midrabanan, but it would be ribis because the wheat was worth $50 when he gave it to him, and it was worth $100 when he got it back. So there was ribis, meaning the improved value of the wheat is considered ribis midrabanan. So that's why you can't just plain say, I'm going to lend you a saw, you're going to be back a saw. We don't know what that saw that you're going to get back is. And if it's not the same amount value of what I gave you, then you're giving me ribis.
One second, he gave him seed. He didn't give him wheat. So
No.
Which one changes value? The
No,
product or the seed?
No. So I think when the Mishnah says chitin, that he lent him wheat, he meant seeds of wheat. In other words, what do you, I don't know, you shake out the kernels, whatever it is that you plant to make wheat, is what he gave him. So if he gave him a stalk or he gave him the seed from within the stalk, either way, that's what he means by chitten. He means he gave him seed. So he gave him the
But
seed.
Jay's question, that's exactly the point. So seed is seed. He still has to. So he's lending him seed. If he repays him in seed, it's not wheat. So the value is not the same until the wheat sprouts and becomes full wheat. So why can't he just return the seeds that he borrowed?
Well, you can't when he's harvesting the wheat, he's harvesting wheat, not seed, right? So
Nobody borrowed seed.
no. So let's look at the language of the Mishnah again, just to be clear. A malva odom esarisin chitin. The malva lent to the sharecropper wheat. Chitin. He lent him wheat.
So it was actually grown.
It was actually a stalk of wheat. Now,
Okay.
right. Now, I'm just suggesting, since I don't know how you plant wheat, that maybe you take a stalk of wheat and you plant it, and that's the seed. I mean, whatever it is, it's the chitin that he is lending him, and the chitin he gets back. So let's say it's even Stephen. He lends him a commodity of wheat, and he gets back a commodity of wheat.
But it sounds like we've had other cases before, all kinds of lending, all kinds of things.
Yeah.
And it seems to me that the only way that we get away with avoiding a problem of, uh-oh, maybe it's a ribis, is if I want to borrow a bushel of wheat or a dozen eggs or anything, okay, that I should I should that the only way I see around it is that I say, oh, that we agree, okay, this bushel of wheat is worth $10. And I say, can you lend me $10? And you say, sure. And you lend me $10 and I hand it around and buy the wheat. Now the I've the and then in the end, or rather, well, whatever. He lends me the money to buy the wheat. So now I've bought the wheat, but I still owe him money, and that eventually I'm paying back money, and money, it's always the same amount.
Right.
Because anytime we're returning item for item rather than money for money, we end up with this question of
Right.
ribas.
So Menashe, you're actually hitting on something that we will discuss in the Gemara. You're right that when you translate the commodity to money, that makes it easier to be able to get back the same money as opposed to saw b'saw. Remember, saw b'saw is a commodity for a commodity, regardless of its value. That's where ribis becomes a problem. You're right that when you translate
ribis is also a problem on money, but on money it's easy to see. $10 is $10.
No. But it wouldn't be a problem of money if I gave you $100 worth and you gave me $100 worth, then we're even. Then there's no ribis problem because the money is even. It's the problem is that the saw is not even because the value of the saw goes up. But what you're positing is what the Gemara is going to talk about shortly in terms of how you should do it. That's how you should do it. You should do it based on the money, not on the commodity. That's the way you get around ribis. But here, on face value, what he's doing is ribis because he's giving him a saw. He's giving him wheat, whatever the commodity, and he's getting back wheat. So wheat for wheat is saw b'saw, which traditionally is a problem of ribis.
But Rabbi, let's make a distinction. Wheat is a commodity, so it's something that grows and it's on the market. But if I lent you a gold watch and you return the same gold watch, it's not ribis, even though the value of the gold watch may have changed. So we're talking about something that is a growing commodity, that it's not going to change. If it's the same item, then it's not ribis. But
right.
if I let you borrow gold,
but Michael, you just hit on it. It's the same item, so it's not ribis. In the case of saw b'saw, it's not the same item. I'm giving you a saw, and you're returning me a different saw.
But I want to ask a question. If I lend you a gold bar, and I return you a different gold bar of the exact same quality, and gold has gone up in the meantime, is that ribis or not ribis?
So l'chayra, the answer is no, because
gold,
you're
because
right.
essentially the gold standard. I mean,
Right, right.
Oh.
So when you're dealing with something like gold, you can't translate that into a commodity like wheat.
But it is a commodity. Maybe it wasn't then, but it is a commodity
gold,
now.
gold, silver,
In a
and
way it is.
gold, silver, and copper were the standard, and in the
Right.
modern era too,
Right.
the standard things that you priced everything by. And but if
Can I
No,
if
add?
you had a bar of platinum,
remember,
an ounce
no,
of
no,
platinum, then maybe that would apply.
no.
Well, one second,
You have to
Rabbi,
go.
can I add
Yeah,
something here?
go
I
ahead, go ahead.
just looked up, how do you get seed for wheat? It turns out when you plant the seeds that come from the kernels,
Yes,
you get wheat, but you also get kernels, and they get harvested because in the kernels are the seeds for next year's
the
planting.
next year's crop, right,
So that's how the cycle of seeds and wheat come about.
right.
So when we go back to the Mishnah, it sounded like if he's lending him the seed, then he will end up the worker will end up manufacturing new seed as well.
But if you
So
give them back that new seed and that new seed has now increased in value, then it's ribis because it's worth more than what he gave him.
that's what I was getting at.
Right,
The
right.
seed becomes the
The seed,
interesting commodity here,
right,
as Michael put it,
right,
because
right.
it's recycling itself.
Right. But to answer Michael's question, to answer your question, Michael, you have to remember the Gemara way back when we started out, when talking about ribis, we said there can't be ribis by money because money is the commodity. It's what everything else is measured against. So when there's an increase in value, the increase in value is on the object, not on the money. Money can never in and of itself increase in value. So when you said Menashe about yes, I mean a gold bar it goes up in price, but the gold bar itself is the money, and money can't you can't have ribis itself on the. It's hard to explain, but
You only have ribis and money if you have more money.
No, or you could have
if you have more
exchange.
money, right? But if you
Well,
have a
we
more
have that
commodity,
we have that today, where the dollar and the shekel are actually making things more difficult for Israelis. The value of the money is changing.
right?
But when the dollar and well, the shekel wasn't around then, but if the dollar and the shekel were both literally on a gold standard, that a dollar was worth however many grams and the
But
shekel was
they're
worth however
not.
many grams, then there wouldn't be anything. There wouldn't be any speculation in
But
currency.
that's not the case in real world
Well,
today.
but I
So
don't know that that's true, Menashe,
uh,
because we understand that it was the coin of the realm or the value of the realm, but there are times when gold became more plentiful or less plentiful, so the standard of the value could change.
Well, I think
So
it would
that's the
change relative. I
question.
think that where that would change is would become the question of the ratio between silver and gold.
Well,
Then the question is
whatever
which
the
if you pick one
standard
of them as the
is,
standard, then the other one it would have
but my
rivets.
point is, if you return the same gold bar that you borrowed, then there's no ribis because it's exactly the same.
correct.
But if you returned a gold bar that at a different time, let's say it was 4 years later, and you returned a gold bar that was not the same, you don't know the purity of the gold, you don't know the value. It could be different, less or more, but you're returning a gold bar of the same weight. The question is, how is that viewed? Is since it's not the same bar, the value changes. Is that like a commodity or not?
So the related question would be, you have a bushel of wheat kernels, seeds, whatever you want to call it, and you borrowed 10 bushels. You ended up only planting 9. So when it comes time to return, 9 of them you're returning because you grew more wheat and you harvested more kernels and you're returning an equivalent. And it's a question of the
Yeah, but the
change of
problem is,
value. But
Rasha,
one of
this is
them, you're returning literally the identical thing, and yet it's valued more because the mark has changed, but it's the
well, that's
identical
my
thing.
same point on gold. That's why I'm
Yeah.
saying you're exactly right. And my question on gold is the same thing. So wheat, fluctuates in the market. So does the value of gold. Even in those times, it may have been the standard, but that doesn't mean that the value of it didn't change.
But
So
that's the point. Even if it changed, it's the commodity measured against the gold that becomes the question of ribbis, not the gold itself. Just like money, if the money changes, it's not money that is changing, it's everything around the money, meaning everything that you can buy for the money. That's where the ribbis question comes in, not on the money itself. So on the bar of gold itself, there wouldn't be ribbis.
But
Which
let's say it wasn't a coin of the realm, it was a bar of steel, which they didn't have at that time. But let's say it was a bar of marble.
platinum or
Let's say
platinum.
marble, and you returned a different, not a bar, but it was
No, I think a good example would be platinum, where it's also nowadays treated as a, metal with a defined value, but it goes up and down. But it wasn't the coin of the realm. It wasn't gold
right.
or
Well,
silver,
that's a good example. Yes, that's a good example.
but where the purity could be
So
ascertained and
is
everything
that a
else.
commodity that you're returning, or is it a
So then maybe on the platinum, there would be a question of ribbis if that wasn't the coin, if that wasn't what everything is measured against, then that would be a commodity like wheat. It would be a commodity like anything else, and therefore you have to be careful not to. It's not the food stuff commodity, Michael, that we're talking about. It's any commodity that isn't in and of itself the money by which everything is measured. So whatever the money of the time, that can't be ribbis. It has to be what it will buy, meaning the commodity that it will buy now versus later. In any event, what we're trying to say here is that the whole principle of saw besaw is that since it's not money, it's a commodity. If I lend you a saw and you're only going to give me back a saw, the problem of ribbis arises because the saw you're giving back could well be of greater value, greater value as against the money that is being used at the time. So that it's the commodity, and therefore I use the gold bar as money. If you're saying gold bar is a commodity measured against something else, then maybe gold bar you also have the same problem. But I looked at gold bar as money, and therefore money itself, if it goes up, that's not where the ribbis is. The ribbis is in the item that money can buy. Anyway, it's a little bit of a question, but we're going to focus on our situation where it was wheat for wheat, and l'chayra it should be ribbis. L'chayra it should be ribbis. But the Mishnah goes on and says no. It says if a person lent him the seed and he got back the chitin for the seed, which looks like saw besaw, says the Mishnah, lizera, if what he gave him was that the wheat that he's giving him wheat, or he's giving him a stalk of wheat, an actual stalk of wheat, which would be sebeseh. He gives him a stalk of wheat, but he says to him, "This seed you should only use to plant for more produce." That takes it out of ribbis saw besaw. That's what the Mishnah is telling us. Saw besaw is ribbis. But if you give him the saw, if you give him the commodity, and you tell him this commodity, it's not for you to eat, it's not for you to bake or make something, it's for you to plant for other saw, then the chiddush here, that's the chiddush in the Mishnah, that l'zera, there's no saw besaw. There's no isser of ribbis and saw besaw if you're telling the sharecropper, use it only to plant for more wheat. Go ahead, Mike.
Right. But then you're returning. So I want to understand the other side of the transaction. When you return a stalk of wheat with seeds, and the value of wheat has changed, it's gone
up. Yes.
Is that ribbis because you said it's sabasaf, it's seed for planting, and you saying back, thank you for giving me this, I'm going to give you back so that you can plant, but it's at a different time, and the value of seeds and wheat for wheat for seeds, seeds for wheat has gone, up 30%. Is that ribbis?
It's not ribis because it wasn't the classic saw basalt to start, because the saw that he gave him, he enunciated that saw was specifically for planting, which now takes it out of the realm of the saw basalt concept of ribis.
But
That's
what
the
he was going to do that? That's implicit. So if there are seeds there, you don't have to specify that. He's going to use the seeds to plant.
No. Let me give you the alternative. Look at the Mishnah. Aval lo lechol, but he can't give him the wheat to say, go ahead and take that wheat and bake a cake with it. In other words, he's giving him the wheat, the stalk of wheat, and in that wheat there are seeds. He's telling him, take that stalk of wheat and plant it and get more wheat.
So is the proviso, Rabbi, that he can't
What happens
use
to the wheat? You don't
But he
throw away
can't
the
tell
wheat.
him, if he tells him, here's a saw of wheat or here's a stalk of wheat, go ahead and make a loaf of bread out of it, as an example. So if he tells him lechol, go use it for food, that's saw besaw and that's ribbis. But if he tells him lezera, go ahead and plant it, don't use it for food, plant it, then the Mishnah is giving us a chiddush and telling us that's an exception to saw besaw, and therefore, with that planting, the owner is allowed to take back a saw, whatever it is, the harvest that the sharecropper is going to give him, and it won't be like kind. And even if it increases in value, it's not going to be ribbis. So the chiddush here, from what the Mishnah is telling us right now at this point, is that giving him a saw for planting is okay, but giving him a saw for eating, that's where the ribbis problem will come in. Because if he pays him back a saw later on, that will be classic.
But we have two things going on though. We have the wheat that comes from the growth. We also have the kernels that have the seeds. So there's two separate things here. I don't think we should. It sounds like we're forgetting the fact that when he says don't eat the wheat and don't use the wheat for food,
right?
But you take the seeds anyway, or versus you take the whole thing and the whole thing is yours, and you can take out the seeds for planting again. So there's confusion with the two sub-elements of the wheat that grows. And it's not clear. It's not clear how you separate.
So I think
ribbis
you have
comes
to make
from the wheat,
yeah,
or from the wheat that's food, or does it come from the seeds? The seeds have increased in value.
That's
why I'm confused with the two products that come out from a planted.
Okay, so I think we have to be a little bit more specific. When the Mishnah says Malva Odom Esavisim Chitin, that the Malva is lending to the sharecropper wheat, he's lending him actual wheat, not the seed is in the wheat, but he didn't separate anything. He's giving him the wheat. That wheat can either be used right away to put into the ground to plant, or that same wheat can be used to make a loaf.
No, they have to harvest the seed from the wheat.
Yeah, I think we're being too specific here.
But Rabbi, I don't because there's value in the seed. So if the wheat goes up in value, so does the seed go up. And he's saying use it to plant and then it's okay, but if you use it to bake, it's not okay. Well, he's going to use it both ways. Presumably, he doesn't want the wheat to rot, so he's going to use it. But if the guy specifies specifically, I'm going to give you this to plant, you're still faced with a ribbis situation if he returns the seeds and the value of the seeds has gone up. And he says to him, I'm giving you this back to plant. Is that ribbis or not when the value of the seeds has gone up 30%?
So this is the chiddush, Michael. The chiddush of what we're now learning from the classic saw that we understand is that if you designate the saw that you're giving him to use for planting, forget about wheat seed, forget about this. I'm giving you a saw, and I want you to take that saw and plant it into the ground. Have no hanoah from it in terms of eating or anything else. That sheds the cloak of potential ribis, so that the return of chitin later on, regardless of the value, is not saw b'saw. The fact that
Whether
you
that's
gave it to
seed
him and
or wheat that
designated,
he returns,
say,
whether that's wheat with seeds that he
I don't
returns.
know if you plant. I don't think you plant wheat. You plant the seeds.
no, according to what this Mishnah is telling us, you plant the whole wheat. You
The
put the
whole, the
whole
whole.
stalk of wheat in the ground. Obviously, the seed is what's going to grow, but you put the stalk of wheat in the ground. That wheat, and if whatever the measure, saw, let's say the saw of wheat that you put in, even though the chaff will come off, but the seed will grow. But so that saw, now all of a sudden you've removed the cloak of saw b'saw. The fact that I gave it to you to plant means that whatever you give me back, regardless of its value, is not ribis, because I started out by giving to you a seed. If I gave it to you to eat, and then you want to replace and return to me as if, oh, fine, I'm going to give you back the saw, that's saw b'saw, which is also beribis, because you're doing it for not, in other words, seeding is an exemption of the principle of saw b'saw. That's what the Mishnah is telling us.
So
Seeding is an
this is what
exemption.
it says. It says you don't plant when you plant wheat, you plant the seeds, often called wheat berries, not the stalk.
That's what I was getting at. You're only planting seed.
Right, but those seeds, the seeds, what we eat as wheat is a part of what would get planted. Because when you eat it, you're taking off the chaff and whatever other stuff,
Seed.
and we're eating just the innermost part.
So I understand
But
the
when you
point
plant it,
that
you're planting the whole stalk. You're not
No, I don't
necessarily
think. No, I
no,
think
planting.
you're
you're
saying
not. No,
you
you're
plant
not.
the berries. You don't
You
plant the
plant the wheat
entire
berries.
stalk,
You
but
You
you
don't
plant
plant the
plant the
stalk.
more
kernels.
than what you would
You
eat.
harvest the kernels to get the seed,
And then you
and
plant the
that's what
seed.
gets
But
planted.
I think what the mission is
Thing.
saying is if it's specifically to plant to grow your own wheat, it's not ribis. But if it was to use the stalk for food, now it's ribis.
Yes.
What I want to understand is he gave him a stalk back which had wheat berries on it, or would become wheat berries. Does the returner, the love, have to return it but with the same distinction? You need to use this for planting because that's what it was
No.
stated when he got
When
it.
the lover returns it, he does not put any
Right. He can't put any restrictions
Stipulation.
on
no
it, but
restriction.
he
He
has
puts
to
no
return the
restriction.
whole thing. He can't just return the edible kernels. He has to
No,
return
he
the
returns
entire
the whole
berries.
thing. Yeah, no, you're right, Menashe. He returns the whole thing, the whole stalk, the
They have to
whole
return the equivalent. Because if he's
the
not
equivalent.
returning the
Right.
equivalent,
So,
then
I
So,
there's for
think
sure there's
so
no.
it's like saying to help your fellow friend grow something for food, it's okay and it's not ribis. But if it's a matter of value of a finished product, then it is ribis because the price changes once it's
right,
grown.
right.
But the seeds themselves don't have the value until it turns into a finished product.
Yeah, I think that's a fair thing to say. So the Gemara will elaborate on this. I don't want to spend more time on it, but just for our purposes, understand that saw b'saw, which is also beribis, is only when you're lending him something for him to consume and then give back to you, but not to plant and give back to you. There is a chilik, and the Gemara will talk more about the chilik, but that's what the Mishnah is now telling us. Lazera, it's not saw b'saw, but la'achila, it's saw b'saw. Okay, fine. Let's just leave it there, and then because our discussion really surrounds a lot of the issues, which I think the Gemara will elaborate. Now, Shahaya Rabbi Gamliel was a machmir. Shahaya Rabbi Gamliel, malve es arisin chitten bechitten. He used to lend to if he had fields, Rabbi Gamliel, so he would lend to his sharecropper his chitten bechitten. He would lend him wheat, for the repayment of wheat. In other words, wheat for wheat, sol b'sol, classic. And lizera, he specified and he said that this chitin should be lizera for seed. Beyoker v'huzlu. Now, Rav Gamliel was a machmer. So beyoker v'huzlu, he lent him the wheat when the wheat was, let's say, $100 a saw. And when he got it back, it was $50 a saw. So it had gone down 50. Oh, bizol v'hukru, or he lent him the saw when it was 50 and he got it back for 100. In other words, there was a price either decline or increase. Notel mehen bishar hazol, he would always repay, he always would tell the sharecropper, repay me bishar hazol for the cheaper price. In other words, always give me back the cheaper price than what I gave you. Why? V'lo mipnei shehalacha came, but not because that was the halacha. In other words, don't make the mistake that Gamliel was saying that's the halacha. He wanted to be a machmir.
Yeah, but that creates a ribbis problem. If it's the lower price, it creates a ribbis problem for
But we don't say that's ribbis, Michael. We don't say it's ribbis if it goes down in price, because we're not speculating and saying that the sharecropper is the one who has to monitor the price and make sure to give him the correct
so the
amount.
sharecropper, if he benefits in a lending situation, it's not ribbis.
So it seems from this Mishnah that under the price decline, we're not going to be absorbed in the ribbis issue. Again, we'll talk about this in greater detail, but it seems from what happened with Rav Gamliel is he's not worried if it goes down in price that there should be ribbis, only if it goes up in price. Again, your point is that it's ribbis the reverse, but we'll get to that.
So I just want to know, is the halacha consider it only that the malva is subject to ribbis, but not the lova?
Yes, that's what we're saying here. That it's the malva who is the one who is going to be getting the ribbis, and if it goes down in price, there's no ribbis. But if it goes up in price, it would be ribbis. But Rav Gamliel said that's not the reason why I'm saying that this is what it is. So don't confuse this with the halacha. I'm only doing it because I'm a machmir, and since again the B'nai Yeshiva, the B'nai Torah, always had to have sort of a more stringent view, so people wouldn't look at them and saying, "Oh, they're taking ribbis." So Rav Gamliel said, therefore, I always want the lesser price, so that no one can come back and say, "Oh, take a look at Rav Gamliel. He took ribbis because he took a higher price." Again, it's a little bit cryptic what this all means, but the point that the Mishnah is making goes back to what we said at the beginning, that there's a difference in saw b'saw between zera and achila. If it's for zera, then it becomes not a ribbis issue, becomes a sort of a let's call it a deal in commerce, and that's different than lending and getting back for ribbis. All right, so the Mishnah, that's why I said it's a little bit complicated. We have to get into it in a little bit more detail, and the details are going to be complicated too. But at least at face value, that's what this Mishnah is telling us. Difference between zera and achila, and Rav Gamliel was b'chlal machmer, so he didn't hold from anything. He held that every time there's a difference between prices, you only pay me the lesser price, not the higher price. Okay, so that's the Mishnah. Now we're going to learn a brisa which says something similar but not identical, and then we're going to get into, if we can today, into a discussion between the Mishnah and the brisa. Tana Rabbanan. So the Rabbanan learned in the brisa as follows. Okay, and it seems similar to what we just said. Malva adam es harisan mechitin. If a person lends his sharecropper he lends him wheat. Now he's using the word chitin and not zera. I mean, for purposes of the language, it says wheat. He's lending him wheat, not a seed, but a wheat. Okay, fine. Now, lizera, if he takes that chitin and he uses it for seed, then and he uses it for seed. So now listen to the brisa. B'med devarim amurim. When do we say that seed takes it away from the iser of saw b'saw shalo yorad? When do we say that that's the case? Only if he lent him the seed before the sharecropper went down into the field to work. What happens with a sharecropper? He goes into the field, he starts tilling the sand, the soil, he starts getting it ready, then he puts the seed in. When does the owner give him the seed is important. Does he give him the seed after the sharecropper has already started plowing the field, meaning he's already prepared the field for seeding, and then the owner gives him the seed? Or does the owner give him the seed? Sharecropper, take the seed. He takes the seed, goes down, starts plowing, and puts the seed in. So now we're being specific as to when the transaction, the loan that we're calling it, of the seed happened. Did it happen shalo yorad, meaning the sharecropper had not yet gone down into the field and he got his seed? Then we're saying that it's not saw b'saw. Aval yorad. But if he already went down into the field, he didn't give him the seed. He went down to the field, he started using the hoe or whatever they used there to start tilling and preparing. Now he's ready to drop the seed into the ground. And then the owner of the field gives him the seed after he's already started the work. Then says the brisa, osir, it's osir because it's saw b'saw. So get a load of this. The timing is what makes it, according to this brisa, the timing is what makes it saw b'saw. In other words, if he gave him the seed after he plowed, that means he's now having a deal with him, the zera, what the Mishnah said, zera, that's okay, because zera is an exclusion from saw b'saw. But if he first went down into the field, and now he started doing, they made an agreement, we're going to make an agreement, I'm going to till and plow the field, and you're going to give me the wheat, and I'm going to return to you the wheat. Now he goes down and does all the work. Now the owner gives him the seed and says, okay, sharecropper, here's the seed, here's our deal. We're making a deal. And the deal is that I give you this seed and you give me back chitin, 50-50, whatever it is. Says the brisa, that's saw b'saw. So get a load of that.
So, Rabbi,
It's not even a question of what are you planting. You're planting in both cases, but when you got the seed makes a difference whether it's saw b'saw. That's the brisa now.
so what's the distinction? Because you're already expecting it and you're jumping ahead, so it's really not like you're lending. You're pushing ahead, and it's more like commerce. And in the other case where you wait, it's not. It's like you haven't done it yet, you don't know it, but you couldn't do it until you actually got the seed, so you're not getting a head start. So it's really like a loan as opposed to not like a loan. What's the thinking behind that?
So I think the way we have to look at it is that there is no loan, because if the sharecropper goes down and starts working the field, and then the owner comes back and says, I changed my mind, I don't want an arrangement anymore. So the work that he did, maybe he'll pay him for the work that he did, but there's no deal. There's no deal because he's not giving him the seed. He changed his mind. So when he gives him the seed, that's what concludes the deal. So once the deal it's not a loan anymore, it's a shutfis. I'm shitfist with you, Michael. You went ahead and did what you did, and I'm now, you know what? I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to make a
Got
deal
it.
with you. So my deal is here's the seed. It's not a loan anymore. It's a deal,
Got it.
So
right?
he makes a
Got it.
kinyan on the seed,
Yeah.
right?
What?
He makes a kinyan on the seed
Right. So
to close the deal.
the seed closes the deal, but he's not lending him the seed anymore. The
Right.
chiddush is that when he went down and he did the work before he got the seed, it's no longer a loan. It's a deal. It's a
But
schutzfis. It's a deal.
but he prepares his land. The sharecropper prepares his land in advance so he can get a head start. And why isn't it a shutfis then too if he gives it?
Because the owner can still back out and said, I changed my mind. I'm not going to give you seed. I'm not going to make a deal with you.
Okay.
Okay. So now we've hit upon a sweet spot that it's the deal that is now making it proper and it's not saw by saw.
So it's
But
never alone in that
it's
situation.
never exactly, it's never alone. But if I give you the seed, I lend you the seed, now you go down and start tilling. I can't tell you, stop, give me back the seed. I already made you a loan of the seed. So you,
But Rabbi, if I'm not a sharecropper and I'm borrowing the seed, how does it
I'm
work?
working your field. I'm working your field. So
So if I'm working my field, does that can't happen? So it can't be that way. If I'm borrowing seed to work my own field,
then
that's
it's saw by saw. Then it's saw by
Saw.
saw.
Okay,
Then
got
it's
it.
saw by saw.
Thank you.
But since he's working the owner's field, so if he advanced him the seed, it's already a loan. Now he comes down and starts doing the work. Now we're left with a loan.
Got it. Got it. Got
Okay,
it.
so that's the brisa. That's not the Mishnah. That's the brisa said the same thing about I'm giving you this seed for planting, right? That's a good start, but I'm making a condition of whether or not yorad or lo yorad. Okay, so now we have a Mishnah and we have a brisa, two separate entities telling us two different things. Frek the Gemara. My Shnor Tana didondolo komafli. Why did our Tana not make a difference between Yorad and Lo Yorad? Why didn't our Mishnah say what that brisa said? That if it's Yorad, if he already went down, then it's a loan. If he didn't go down, then it's not a loan. Why didn't it? And conversely, Umay Shnor Tana bara de komafli. Why did the Tana make that chilik? In other words, now the Gemara is asking. This is a little bit funny. We have a Mishnah and Brisa wanting to tell us the same thing, but the Mishnah just goes ahead and says that automatically, if I give it to you for seed, it's okay, but for chila it's not. And the Brisa is saying, wait a minute, no. If I give it to you for seed, that doesn't end the story. There's still a distinction between Yorad and Lo Yorad. So it would seem that the Brisa is a stira on the Mishnah because the Mishnah is giving us very bland, you know what, you give it for seed, it's okay, no saw basal.
Not specific enough.
What's that? Yeah, not right. Comes the Brisa and says, no, you can't just stop and say Zera alone removes it from saw basaw. It only removes it when there's no loan. If there's a loan, meaning that he was Yorad, there's a loan, then there is saw basaw. So how Mishnah can you say generically you give it for seed, it's no longer a loan? That's the kasha that the Gemara asks. The Gemara doesn't understand. The Mishnah says one thing, the Brisa says something else, and we're kind of in a quandary here. How do we understand them? So that's a good kasha. So we have to understand what's the chiluk between the Mishnah and the Brisa. Now is when it gets very interesting. Why? Take a look. Omar Rava. So Rava is going to give us an answer. Rav Idi Asabra Nali, that Rava says that Rav Idi had to explain to me the chiluk. Rava is Rava, right? Rava is Rava. But Rava is saying, I don't understand. Rav Idi has to explain to me what is the Mishnah saying and what is the Brisa saying. So So here's what the Gemara is introducing. Again, we don't know this now. So the Gemara is introducing this to us. Ba'asra the Tana Didan. Okay, so clearly the Mishnah and the Brisa, the Mechaber didn't live in the same town. Why? We'll see in a minute. They lived in different places where there were different minhagim. And the minhagim seemed to be what drove the Mechaber of the Mishnah and the Mechaber of the Brisa to say what they said. But also the Tana Didan, in the place where our Tana lived, Orisa Yohiv Bizra, listen to this. The custom was that the Oris, the sharecropper, Yohiv Bizra, he's the one who brought the seed. That when the sharecropper came to the owner and said, you have a piece of land, I would like to work your land and get a parnasa from your land. And here I have a bundle of seed. I'm going to put the seed in the ground. You have to do nothing. And then I'm going to share the proceeds. But it's my seed. It's the sharecropper's seed. Right? Then Ben Yorad and Ben Lo Yorad, there's no difference whether or not he entered into the land to plow or not, because it's his seed. There's no loan here anymore. The loan portion is gone because it's the sharecropper's seed, right? So, Kama the lawyer Bizra, then now, the owner says to the sharecropper, you know what? Keep your seed. I'm going to supply the seed. So he says to him, I know the minig is for you to supply the seed, but I'm going to supply the seed. Says the Mishnah, then he can say, I changed my mind. But now the sharecropper goes ahead anyway and he starts work, right? Then he's getting into a deal with the owner, which is no longer advantageous to him. Okay, so what happened here? The minig is that the oris brings the seed. He brings the seed, and we're saying, fine, you bring the seed, forget about saw b'saw, there's no saw b'saw, it doesn't matter what you do. The owner flips the switch and says, you know what, hold your seed. I have seed, I need to use my seed, here's my seed. So he takes the owner's seed, and now he no longer uses his own seed, he uses the owner's seed. So now he's using the owner's seed, he's going into the field, and he's going to plant. So now that he's going to plant, it's no longer a 50-50 proposition because the owner has given him the seed. Therefore, so therefore, now when they're going to make a deal, the deal's not going to be shava b'shava 50-50. The deal will be 40-60. In other words, the owner, because he gave the seed, will get 60% of the produce, and the sharecropper will get 40% of the produce. No, you forget about the saw b'saw. You have no longer saw b'saw. It's a business deal, but it's a business deal because they negotiated differently than what we understand.
Rabbi, I have got real trouble with this, so I want to understand.
Okay, so let's break it down.
Is it saw b'saw because the sharecropper gave him the seed, so he benefited because the price that he gets.
So the saw b'saw is because the owner gave the sharecropper the seed.
No, well, I'm saying, but in the first case where the sharecropper offered to give the seed,
no saw b'saw, no more saw b'saw.
Why? The owner is getting something that he didn't
for nothing.
Pay for.
No, he's getting something for nothing.
Right. So that's ribis.
No. It's an agreement that I will use my seed. You'll be my partner, and I'll give you for my partnership.
To me, it could work either way. The percentage changes on whether you supply the seed or don't supply the seed. So if the sharecropper supplies the seed, he gets a higher percentage, and if he does, because he has to pay into the partnership more.
No,
If he doesn't, then it's more on the owner's side.
But Michael, think what you're saying. Saw besaw means that the origination of the saw came from the malveh, and the love is going to pay him back. That's why it's saw besaw, because the malveh lent him the seed, and the transaction started with the
When you say
malveh.
he's going to pay him back, he gets a cut. He gets a lower cut.
No, but a cut is not a loan, Michael. A cut is not a loan.
Right, that's a
Hi, Jeff.
transaction.
I'm in the middle of
It's a
Shiur.
transaction.
How are you?
Once it's a transaction, there's no longer saw besaw. Saw besaw is only with a loan,
Right.
not with a transaction.
But what I don't understand is if he gives him the seed,
Who gives who?
the lova gives the malva the seed and says,
Correct.
"I want you to use my seed."
No
And
more
get-
saw besaw.
Wait a minute.
Saw besaw doesn't apply.
And gives a higher percentage.
Business deal, strictly. Yes.
Business
No
deal.
saw besaw.
So no saw besaw. So the sharecropper can do that.
Yes, he can. Yes, he
and
can
it's
do that.
still a deal. It's not a problem.
Deal. It's not a loan. It's a deal.
Okay.
We're trying to understand
I
why our
misunderstood
Mishnah.
what you said. I'm sorry.
Right. So we're trying to understand why our Mishnah doesn't use the language of the
Yeah.
Brisa, that there's a difference between Yorad and Lo Yorad.
Yeah.
Right? That's what.
Yep.
That's our aim.
Yep.
So the Gemara is explaining. You know what? There's a difference between the minhagim of the Mishnah and the Baal Brisa lived in a different community, and we're going to see what was the minig in that community. Okay, we're going to see in a minute. So we understand that the circumstance was the Oris came with the seed. He was about to plant the seed. The owner said to him, "Hold your seed. I'm going to give you seed, and we're going to make a deal. And the deal will be that my seed will give me 60%, and you have nothing but work, and your work will give you 40%. That's a perfectly good deal. You can do that 7 days a week, no problem. Okay, but Ba'asra v'tana bara, but in the place where the Tana of the Brisa lived, different minhagim. More ara yara vizra. The minig was that the owner does supply the seed. In other words, now we're starting from the owner. The owner supplies the seed. That was the minig. So now the Brisa has to tell us, Elo Yorad, since the owner is the one who's going to give the seed, if he didn't yet go down, right? And the Motzah Masalik clay, where the owner can say, you know what, I changed my mind. I don't want to make a deal. Right? Forget about it. I don't want to make a deal. Kikonachis. So when the sharecropper nevertheless goes onto the field, he is making his own deal because he's bringing his own seed. He's bringing his own seed. According to this Brisa, it's the owner who normally supplies the seed. And he was going to give him the seed, and he changed his mind. He said, you know what, I don't want to get. And nevertheless, the sharecropper went ahead and went into the field. He went into the field, and he did not have any seed from the owner, took his own seed, put it into the ground, and made it work. Then there's no problem. There's no problem because he's using his own seed. He's not borrowing seed from the owner. So therefore, there's no ribbis problem. We'll finish and talk about it. Yored, however, if he went down and he started working the field, didn't get the seed yet, but started working the field,
Preparing.
Then the Lomotzim is solidly, then the owner can no longer tell him, get off my field, and he gives him the seed, the seed. Also, that's becomes saw besaw. So in the case of the Brisa, the reason why it's saw besaw is why? Because he went down. he went down into the field, meaning he went into the field, Yorad.
Started
Into the
preparing.
field, he plowed,
Yeah.
and then the owner said, okay, I relent, here's the seed. That's a saw. He lent him a saw. Then says the Brisa, if it's for planting, it's okay. But if it's for eating, it's not okay. In the first case, it doesn't matter whether it's for planting or for eating because the sharecropper used his own seed, even though the meaning was that the owner uses the seed, but he used his own seed. When you use your own seed, there can never be saw besaw because I didn't get anything from you that I'm now returning something of greater value. It's only a deal. And the deal is what it is, 50-50, 60-40. Whatever deal they make, they can make. There is no restriction on the deal. There's no ribbis. There's no ribbis on a deal. There's a ribbis on a loan. So on the deal, you can make any deal you want. If you don't want 50-50, I'll give you 60-40. The deal is the deal. But once you're talking loan, then you're talking potential ribbis. That's why the Mishnah is generic, and the Brisa has to say Yorad and Lo Yorad because the minig was different. They flipped the minig. The minig, instead of the sharecropper bringing, it's the owner who brings. But the owner reneged. He said, "No, I don't want to make a deal." The sharecropper went and brought his own seed. Now he brought his own seed. He takes it out of Sol B'Sol. So that's why I say it's a little bit complicated to understand that there's a Mishnah, there's a Brisa, they say different things. Why do they say different things? Because there's different minhagim, there's different approaches to how this whole thing works. And therefore, we have to be very makbid that if it isn't a saw besaw lazera, but la'achila, that's the only time when the saw besaw is a problem. If it's lazera, if it's used for planting, then the whole concept of saw besaw doesn't apply. That's what this chiddush is of this Mishnah and Gemara, is that everything that we thought about saw besaw, oh my gosh, saw besaw, you can never do it. Yes, there's a caveat. You can't do it if I'm giving you a saw and you're going to eat, bake, and make from the saw and give me back. Then I'm worried about. Now, why did the Tanoim? Why did they do that? I guess because they felt that if you're using it for food and you want to give me back, and you say thank you very much, you lent me, I was able to eat. Now you have to be more makbid because you had immediate benefit from it. Again, whatever the assumption is, that's what saw besaw was in the classic sense. You can't do it. But once you start carving out the exception and saying that if I gave it to you for planting, not for eating, then this whole inyan of saw besaw, it softens. In other words, it doesn't have the same punch that it would if I just lent you the seed and you baked and you ate and you gave me back. That seems to be again in the eyes of the Tanoim, that seemed to be more egregious than merely just giving it to him for planting. So again, very interesting that saw besaw now has a caveat, and also further that there was minhagim that translated into differences as to regions as to how saw besaw would take place.
Implemented.
Okay. Right? So I think we've now straightened it out. It's a little complicated, but we got it. Okay. So now the Gemara goes weiter and says, now we're going to, okay, so we gave examples. Now let's talk about saw besaw. Tana Rabbanan, what is saw besaw? A person says to his friend, Alveni kur chitin, lend me a kur. Kur is a measure of chitin, bekotzitz lo damim. Now, this is to Menashe's point at the very beginning of our discussion. Bekotzitz lo damim, and he fixed the price for the car. The car is $100. The car that I'm giving you is $100. Huzlu, if the car of wheat went down in price, it's now worth 50. Nosen lo chitin, then he can give him back the chitin because from the malva standpoint, there is no ribbis. Michael, it's the malva that we're looking at. There's no ribbis because it went down in price. However, hukra, if it became more expensive, nosen de mayhem, then he will give him the domim, he'll give him back the original value of, in other words, he's not going to give him back the car, he'll give him the money.
Money, right.
Money. Menashe, to your point, he'll give him money, not a car. Okay, fine. That's okay. That's what the Rabbanan learned. Frek the Gemara v'halo kotzeis. V'halo kotzeis. They established, right? It says halveni kurchetin, but kotzeis lo damim, and they fixed a price for the damim, and they said that the price is $100. So if the price is $100, and then it went up in price, he has to give him the money. If you give him down in price, he can give him the chitin. V'halo kotzeis, but they fixed a price for the wheat. So if he gives him back, in other words, in the case of where it went down in price, why should he accept that core back? It's now worth 50. They said 100. So Michael, this is a kasha on the, and when it goes down in price, when it goes down in price, it's okay, it's fine. Why is it okay? They said, I'm lending you a car for $100. It's $100. So the $100 was already mentioned in the discussion. Why is the $100 not mentioned in the discussion going back? Why can't you give him a car which is now worth 50? Right? That's the kasha.
Right.
Good kasha, right? It should be. And for the Gemara Amar Rav Sheshes, so Rav Sheshes says, Hochikama. The Brisa, the way we read it is we're not reading it correctly. If he im low kotzeitz, if he did not establish a price and say, here's a car, it's $100, huzlo noto chito, if the wheat then goes down in price, then he gives him the same amount of wheat, the car, he gives him back the car. Hukro nosum demeim. But if it's more expensive, he gives him the original value of the car. If they did not fix a price, then if it's cheaper, tough luck, so to speak. I mean, it
goes with the market.
You go with the market.
Mm-hmm.
But if it goes up in price, in order not to avoid ribbis, he has to give him the same amount of core in value. If it got 100 bushels and now it's 125 bushels, he has to give him 125 bushels, right? Okay.
Yeah.
But if they established a price, $100, then you're 100% right. If it goes down, you got to give him $100. So the point here is that if you fix a price in damim, then damim is what you have to give him. If you give him back a car that's worth 100, that's great. But you can't give him back a car that's worth 50 because you established 100. But with the Bryce is saying, but would you did not establish in low kotzeis, if you didn't fix the price, you only said here's 50 bushels, then if it went down in price, you only give him back 50 bushels because that's what you borrowed. But if it went up in price, since those bushels are now worth more and you lent him that amount, in order to not have ribbis, you have to give him back bushels of the original value of the bushels. And if the bushels were $100, then you have to give him back less than $100 worth of in other words, you have to give him back less than 50 car because maybe only 30 car is now worth the value. So Rav Sheshes is telling us that there's really two parts to the brisa, because otherwise it's a good kasha. Why, when it goes down, should the guy take a loss? The answer is because you take a loss when you don't articulate the price. Then 50 car remains 50 car. And if it went down in price, it's still 50 car. But when you establish a price, then you become price sensitive. And like we said in the very beginning, when we discussed that money is the sort of the barometer by which we go. We don't go by the commodity, we go by money. And if he articulated, I'm giving you $100 worth, you got to give me $100 back. If 50 cars is no longer $100, give me back 70 car,
So,
80 car,
Rabbi,
whatever it is to make up the
want to make
$100.
I'm sorry. I want to make sure I understand this. So
Right.
they make a deal, they set a price. This is I'm
50 car worth $100.
worth $100. So he either has, and the price goes down. He has to give him either $100
Or more car.
or more core. If it goes up,
Gives him less car.
gives him less core,
Because,
but
because
not less money. He's got to pay back in the commodity.
the commodity, right?
Okay. Thank you.
But if you don't articulate it, then down is not a problem because the malva isn't stuck, but up is a problem. So if up is a problem, then you have to give him less car in order to even out the amount of money. So what the Gemara wanted to explain to us what saw besaw is, and it's explaining that saw besaw, that's what saw besaw is. It depends on whether you say with the transaction a monetary amount, or you don't say a monetary amount. That distinguishes whether saw besaw how you pay back. Because otherwise, you're right, Michael. When it goes down in price, the guy's taking a loss. Yeah, he's taking a loss because they didn't articulate money. Remember, money is the fixed amount. If money doesn't change, the commodity changes, but money doesn't change. That's why with the gold bar, it depends if that was the commodity or that was the money. But the money never changes. So therefore, if you articulate money, then you have to go by the money. If you don't articulate money, then you go by the commodity. And
So you're crazy not to articulate money in any transaction because you're approximating the value that it is now, and we can't base it on future value. So you have to say it's equivalent to this, and you're going to pay me back the equivalent of what that is, one way or another.
Yeah, but remember in those days, Michael, in the agrarian society, so people traded commodities all the time. So maybe here, I'm giving you 50 car, give me back 50 car. They didn't even think, I mean, you're right, they should have, but they didn't. They didn't articulate values. They said, here's 50 car, just make sure I get back 50 car. So now if it's 50 car and it goes down in value, you're getting your 50 car, you didn't articulate a value, but if you're getting more than value for the 50 car, now we got to adjust. Even if you didn't articulate the money, we've got to adjust the car. All right, so that now ends this sugya. So now we understand what a saw is. We also understand the nuances of the Mishnah and the Brisa as to why one said Yorad and Lo Yorad and why one didn't. So Mitzvah next week, we start another Mishnah. So now we're going into shorter, it looks like into shorter pieces. But again, we're getting a flavor here of ribbis of a different sort. In other words, you never get away from ribbis. You always got to worry about ribbis. I just had a situation, by the way, I'll close out, where we have a commercial loan that we're taking on a project, and lo and behold, we find out that the lender is Jewish. It's a lender we didn't know. The lender's Jewish. So what do? We have to write a heta iska. They don't know from heta iska. They say, whoa, what's this heta iska? We're not into heta iska. It took a lot of fine negotiating to get them to understand and agree, because we were on pins and needles whether or not we were going to get this loan because they refused to do a heta iska. Now they mostly must either deal with Jews who don't not mock it on heta iska or not, whatever. All of a sudden they found a group of people who said heta iska, and they don't know from heta iska. So it's not so pashut in the marketplace that everybody will right away agree. I just make a point that sometimes you have to go through this with a fine-tooth comb to make sure, A, that your lender is not Jewish, right? Doesn't matter if he's from or not. If he's not Jewish, you can't borrow the money. And then you got to go into the whole process of explaining a heta iska. So Baruch Hashem, we got through it, but in real life, you see that there are situations where it becomes something that has to be carefully negotiated. So Mitzvah Hashem, next week we'll pick up on the next Mishnah, and everybody should have a wonderful week.